Cal Jalape. And then we were like, this dude sucks. And his wife also sucks. Hey, thanks for joining the Escape With Me book club. Escape with me, Lizzie Sawyer.
And me, Sam Reiner.
Into our most recent read. Come with us as we evade reality and go into detail about a new book. We're going to be covering the book from beginning to end, so remember, there will be spoilers.
Today we are going to Unspecified City, Minnesota. Published in 1966, Lilian Jackson Braun brings intrigue and mystery into her legendary The Cat Who series that can still be found on bookstore shelves today. The first entry is The Cat Who Could Read Backwards. Just a little bit of background on this. I was introduced to the series by my mom growing up, and I've read this specific book several times, about 4, and it is one of my favorite mystery series.
I have been forced to read this book by my friend, but I found it a good read.
So it all works out, and that's the important thing about book clubs, is forcing your friends to read the books you like, because otherwise they wouldn't.
Because clearly they'll like them too, and they must read them, because you have to have someone to talk to them about.
To begin with, we're going to do a Judge a Book by Its Cover segment. I had to try to remember what teenage me thought of this book series when I first read it, but from what I remember, I thought like a 1960s kind of mystery novel would be super dark and gritty. I thought the protagonist was going to be female because it was a female writer, and I thought the cat would predict bad events to happen by reading certain things backwards. So either it would be something like the newspaper has an article, it's like, will there be a recession? And then the cat reads recession backwards and like the recession happens, or hurricanes or something like that. Either that or the cat would appear right before or right after something bad happens. And so they were like predicting bad things happening.
I didn't think it was going to be in the 60s. It actually took me a little bit to figure out what time period it was. Just from the cover, I honestly thought it was going to be 20s. I don't know why I thought it was going to be 20s.
Because it has a very 20s-esque book cover.
It does. And the first couple of vibes until they go, electric pencil sharpener, is very 20s, you know, like reporter's room and everybody on their typewriters and all this.
Which makes a perfect contrast because you can tell Qwill's like big moments were in the 1920s. That was when he was young and fresh starting. He was a war correspondent. He did crimes, and you can tell like he misses those 1920-esque things, and anything that he mentions that's 1960s, he hates.
But my first impression of the cover, you know, obviously it's going to be a mystery and there's blood on the cover, so obviously someone's gonna die. That was basically my first impression. Was it's going to be a 20s, it's going to be based in the 20s, and someone's going to die, and there's going to be a cat in there somewhere who can apparently read backwards.
Doing something.
She's doing something. I don't know, you just kind of handed me this book and was like, I love this mystery series, read this one. And I was like, okay.
Now we join Jim Qwilleran as he picks up a copy of the Daily Fluctuation and waits for his appointment with the editor. Qwill, a down-on-his-luck but seasoned hard-lined reporter, takes a job in the art section of the town's newspaper in a fit of employment desperation. He is soon thrown into the middle of a crazy murder investigation, including his love interest husband, a prominent artist, and his landlord, the controversial art critic. Begin off, what do you think of the Daily Fluctuation crew? Arch Ricker, Odd Bunsen, Lodge Kindle. I always think Lodge is a weird first name, and so I always even when I'm reading the book, I will mix them up.
Kindle is a better first name for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay, Lodge Kindle. They're very gritty. You can tell they grew up in the 20s, 30s, 40s, because, you know, they're very gritty, they're very, you know, like, gotta get this paper, see? You can just tell from their demeanor and the way they talk to one another and, you know, the places they hang out and all this, that, and the other with just how they interact.
I always get the feeling that Lodge is younger than everyone else. And maybe not Odd Bunsen, because Odd Bunsen, like, also strikes me as he just started, like, he's in his late 20s, early 30s. But Lodge always also struck me as he's much younger, because we're introduced to Arch, and he's an old-time friend of Qwill, and you can tell he's that old-timer, but I feel like Odd and Lodge are much younger.
Yeah, Odd's always felt older to me, and I think it's the way that he's interacts with the other characters. He's very forward. It doesn't feel like he's talking to someone who's necessarily his superior. He's just kind of like, yeah, you're my buddy, and we're gonna talk. It's gonna be great. So he's just felt older.
Yeah, he does fit in really well. It's a hard thing to explain because if you ask me, what does Archricker or Odd Bunsen really add to this book specifically? I would have a hard time describing it, but just because I've read so many books in the series and these are recurring characters, I can have this feeling of long term, oh, they add so much, but like looking at this book specifically, they don't really add much. Like Archricker is always there to remind Qwill that he needs to be writing that article on Jalape, and then Odd just always seems to be there to move the plot along, to be like, hey, we need to go here now, or Qwill's inviting him to a place, and then that's how they meet up. But it's not necessarily that they add much. On the other hand, Lodge completely adds much because he's always talking about the investigation. He's the one who invites the officers out. Like, he does so much more, but he doesn't show up as much in later books, so I don't actually think that much of him versus Arch and Odd, which feels really weird.
Well, Lodge doesn't show up until probably about halfway through the book, and then he's really only there to give Jim a connection to the officers in the case and to give him more info in the case, because at this point he's got people that he's been working with for different articles that he's met and talked to that he potentially cares about that are attached to this murder now.
Or the mini murders.
Yeah, but I mean, when he meets Lodge, it's just one murder.
Oh, how the tables turn.
Oh, how the turns table.
Included in the 3 reporters, I'm going to include Bruno as a member of the Daily Fluctuation because...
Oh, I love Bruno. He's my favorite side character. He's an artist. He wants to make his drinks, like, flamboyant and fancy, and he takes bottle labels and makes pictures of presidents out of them. He, washes them and dries them out and makes these pictures.
And you know what's kind of sad? We never actually get to see them. There's a scene where Bruno straight up is just like harassing Qwill and being like, hey, look at my pictures. I have 2 under the bar right now. And Quill's like, clearly this is not the moment.
Would you critique these for me? Do you think you could get me in one of the showrooms? I could have a one-man show.
It's just very funny that everyone he comes in contact with either is very outright an artist, and that's why Qwill's talking to them, or is like secretly like, I have the ambitions! Which honestly, I feel like is accurate to life. You can probably speak to this much more than I can, because you're much more on the art scene, but from what I've seen, if you mention to someone, hey, I'm into artsy stuff, they're like, I'm an artist too!
Yeah, anytime I mention anything about art, I usually find out that someone either took art classes in high school, like I did, or is secretly an art major. I had someone at work, I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, let's do this like this for art, whatever, and they were like, oh, I can do that. I'm an art major. And I was like, oh, well, what are you working in retail for?
To pay the bills.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm in retail.
But Bruno, I count him because every time we see Bruno, Qwill is with somebody from the fluctuation. There is no moment where it's just him and Bruno. Or if there is, it's because the other ones walked away. He's part of that group.
I mean, yeah, he works at the press club and all of the reporters hang out there, so he's definitely part of the crew.
I feel like he's much more, he's not, but because he has this subplot about the whiskey bottle labels coming up over and over again, I feel like he adds a lot to this book. I feel Qwill's pain. He doesn't stay on the beat very long, not to really spoil, but each book he takes on a new beat. But I feel like if the series had continued in this vein, he would just keep coming up to people and they would be like, make me famous, you have some connection, and he's like, I've been in the city for 2 days, I don't even know these people, please stop asking me for connections. This entire town is filled with egotistic artists, and so is the book. So let's start off with the very first one we meet. In the very beginning of the book, Qwill is told he has to write an article about this man, and so he meets Cal Jalape.
And he never actually manages to write an article about this man.
I know, I got to the end of the book and I was thinking, oh yeah, he totally writes an article about it. And you get to the end and you're like, oh, guess we're never gonna get that article about Cal Jalape. That's cool.
When I was typing up my notes, I actually typed up under the stuff I had for Cal Jalape, where the book talks about the article stuff. I go, we never revisit this. There's actually a couple of things in there that I have written. We never revisit this. This never pops up again.
And that's the one thing, because he meets Cal, and then he's no help in getting any information from him. And then we have two scenes of him trying to get information from his wife, Sandy Jalape. And one is like a formal luncheon invite, which she's completely useless.
She's no help at all.
She's as bad as her husband.
Just completely scatterbrained.
Well, no, that's the funny thing. He's completely scatterbrained. She is a heat-seeking missile. She wants another man. But it equals out to them being equally useless.
They married really young. I mean, in the book, he's 29 and his kids are 8 and 6. So he would have to have been married, assuming they had kids right after they were married, which was normal for the time, I assume. They would have been 20, 21 when they got married.
Oh, yeah.
It was very, I've made my fortune, and now this hot lady wants a piece of me.
Pretty much. I think that's one thing that it's never completely confirmed, because it is absolutely confirmed between Zoe and Earl that there is no love in that marriage. But I do feel like it is implicated that maybe Sandra really liked Cal's looks when they first got married, but it's like a marriage for money, definitely. And she may have like been really falling for him, but as she has gotten older, she's slowly getting jealous of Cal because he's the youthful looking one, and she may be aging not as gracefully as she wants to. It never mentions if she's aging well or not. I mean, I'm assuming she's also has to be young, like 28, 29.
You would assume. It never really goes into her age. She may be a cougar. There's honestly no telling.
She seems very resentful of Cal in a lot of different ways. So I'm gonna just include them right here. Tim and Tim's girlfriend were absolutely throwaway characters. The only reason they're in the book were to make Cal and Sandy look more suspicious, because they themselves don't look that suspicious, but both of them, by extension, are like connections to different murders. Tim is working at the happening, and then the girlfriend is, oh, she's suspicious. She's trying to lead us away from this missing dagger. It really is just to be who you know extension of, oh, Cal and Sandy are suspicious. I never suspected them.
No, they're not suspicious at all. And they only pop up a little bit, and then we don't really ever return to them.
Yeah, they're a huge thing in the beginning of the book. And then every time we see Arch Ricker, he's, oh, you need to get on that. You need to write this article. But there were clues set out to be like, oh, it could be Cal and Sandy because they were so important in the beginning. But nothing about it seemed right. Also, the dagger, I never really understood why Qwill got so focused on the dagger.
They throw that in. Bruno's just like, yeah, the museum. There's a missing dagger. They're covering it up. And then he goes there and he harasses the museum director a little bit and then leaves, and then that's solved, and then we never revisit that. I don't understand why that's in this book.
I think the assumption is because Mont Clemens is murdered, and they never find the murder weapon, and I think it's supposed to imply that someone stole that dagger to kill him with.
But it's only not even a chapter later, it's only a few pages later that they're like, oh yeah, we found the dagger.
But also, I had a moment of Occam's razor of, so he has a bunch of really good cooking knives upstairs, or they plan a super intricate heist to steal a dagger from the museum instead of just taking a dagger from his kitchen or their own kitchen or anywhere else. There is no way someone stole this dagger to kill Mont Clemens at all. That is not even a red herring. So the next one is Butchie Bolton. And she also plays a really big part in this book as essentially the main suspect of the entire investigation. The entire time, Qwill is like putting bets that this is her because she has connections. She is a much more serious red herring, in my opinion.
They do make her much more suspicious in the book than they do a lot of the other characters.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it is wrapped around what they believe Butchie's intentions are, or what they could be. And so it does make her make a lot more sense. She didn't like Earl. She was right there next to 9-0, who gets murdered at the happening. Oh, she might have pushed him off. And then there's that end with Mont Clemens. It's like, okay, so she did that to, like, protect Zoe.
Yeah, they give her that overprotective, has slightly lost their mind in what they believe is ownership of a person kind of a vibe, which really isn't the case once you get deeper into the book and actually things start to piece together.
And you actually talk to Butchie.
She's just lonely and in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah. And I mean, you can definitely tell there is some sort of infatuation with Zoe.
It's probably her only friend, like only close friend from her past.
Yeah, and Zoe even specifically says she doesn't have that many friends, and the one she has, she's like, super clingy with, which probably just like drives them off more. But I mean, and essentially what it boils down to is her name is Butchie Bolton. She looks exactly how you think that name would have her look. She acts exactly how that name would have you think she would act. She's essentially a trope, a popular trope, and I think this trope is actually used very well because we don't spend that much time with Butchie, and so she uses this trope to be like, oh, this is what she could be like, because Qwill is having his biased opinions on what she is, and then finds out, hey, you're wrong.
Yeah.
But speaking of Zoe, let's just begin the tirade of how much I hate her.
I don't hate her.
Okay, so my main problem was I didn't like her, but I didn't like a lot of characters. You're not supposed to like them. They're supposed to be terrible people. But I didn't like how Qwill always felt so infatuated with her. And I just felt like it made him dumb.
I wouldn't use the word dumb per se. He obviously has a type, and at least her physical structure and voice definitely hit his type markers, so I think it's that man crush, but it doesn't necessarily make him dumb. He kind of uses it to his advantage to get more information out of her.
He does, but he'll do things like
walk several miles in snow to get...
It's so dumb! He'll walk through the snow in February.
In Minnesota, so it's, the snow, it definitely has to be several inches, at least on the sidewalk.
It's so... The way he goes out of his way to do things for her, and he finally suspects her so late in the book when it could have been, hey, she was at the murder scene of her husband. She's the one who found him. That should be your suspicious, but he immediately goes to, oh, poor Zoe, the poor thing. She's too delicate.
Okay, something that blows my mind about this book, right? This actually just occurred to me. It's February in Minnesota. They should talk way more about the multiple layers that people are wearing. I lived there for a year. In February, it gets to negative degrees very frequently during the day.
It's ridiculous.
They need to be talking about people taking scarves off, people taking jackets off, bundling up to go outside. It's cold in Minnesota.
Yeah, when they find Mont Clemens, he went down in his silk house jacket, and he had something over him, but I don't care if he had something over him, and he was just waiting for a few minutes.
No, you don't wait for a few minutes in Minnesota at night, in the cold, in February. It's negative 16 degrees outside. Get your butt back inside.
He had it draped over him. He wasn't wearing a jacket.
He brought a jacket with him.
Exactly, but that's what I'm saying. He had it draped over him because he threw it off. There's no way he could have thrown it off if he actually was wearing it.
And this really has just occurred to me. I didn't think about this at all reading through this book.
I'm thinking about it the entire time because I read another mystery series that takes place in Minnesota, and they spend like half of the book complaining about how cold it is. Rightfully so.
It's so cold.
At one point they point out, hey, put your hands in the freezer because it's warmer than outside, and that just should not exist.
I mean, they're not wrong.
As a Southern woman, I just declare that cold weather should not exist. But at no point is it even a inconvenience. of any sort ever. I don't even think they mentioned snow.
No.
Except for the one time they go into the press club and they're like, it's snowing.
Yeah, it's February. It's February in Minnesota. It's been snowing for at least a month. But it usually starts snowing. Let's see, when did it start snowing when I was up there? I think it started snowing at the end of November at the latest. There may have been snow in October. Patches and then it melts and then patches and then it melts. But you get like your first stick snow at the end of November. I could be completely wrong. I normally live in Georgia. So
my grandmother is from Minnesota before she moved down south, but her dad always had this saying that there was only a no chance of snow on the 4th of July at noon. Otherwise, all bets are off.
Yes, that's Minnesota.
I remember visiting them, and I was up there for a week, and the week was hot, but we got to the weekend, and this was in June, and they were like, oh, it's gonna get randomly super cold. We might see snow. And I'm just sitting there like, at home, it's 100 degrees outside. How does this place exist?
It brings new meaning to Christmas in July. Sometimes Minnesota has Christmas in July.
Yeah, I don't think anyone there is dreaming of a white Christmas. I think they're just going outside. But anyway, back to Zoe. The first time I read this book, I went up to my mother and I was like, is Zoe in other books in this series? Because I would have dropped this series because I just did not like Zoe. I did not like the weird relationship Qwill had with her, because it wasn't quite romance, because it did always feel like she was pulling strings and Qwill was letting her. And so I was, is she in any of these other books? And my mom honestly didn't remember who she was. And I was like, all right, it's safe. We can keep going.
Yeah, I mean, she's not the best character. It's not scatterbrained. She's forgetful, and
she's flighty.
Most of the stuff she says is very vague, and she just doesn't, other than the fact that she's a pivotal part of figuring out who murdered her husband, she doesn't bring much to the feeling of the book at all.
She actually is the reason for more problems. She told him to go see 9-0. She is the relationship with Butchie. It's her husband, her lover? They never confirmed that, but it's her flirt thing that also got killed. She's the connection to a lot of this. And her protege is the one who got murdered as well. So she's related to very intimately to all 3 murder victims. So she is a pivotal character.
Mont Clemens isn't her lover. He's been kind of forcing her to be his lover in a way because he owns their gallery.
That's the one thing. Well, at the time, she didn't know that. And so for then, it was just because she wanted good reviews and to keep that going.
But she didn't like him. She thought he was gross.
Yes, but that's the thing. So I'm never sure if it was just flirting and it never got past that. But I guess it really doesn't matter. But still, she is very intimately connected to all of the victims, which makes her a great character for this book. But I do not want to see this relationship continue once the book is no longer basically about her.
Yeah, she's not important enough really to stick around, I don't think.
No. So there are a bunch of other artists that are literally just thrown into the book for flavor text.
Ambiance, kind of. It's just kind of, we need to build the art community. We need to have names that we can reference back to. You're like, oh yeah, Uncle Waldo, who does the watercolors, and I forget the name of the guy that paints the farm animals, and
that's Uncle Waldo.
Oh, is it? Who's the guy that does the watercolors?
The watercolors is Butch Walter.
See, these are such memorable characters. I totally remember all of their names.
They're in 2 scenes. Well, okay, so the Butch Water is in 2 scenes, and they're literally just there so we can meet someone that Mont Clemens reviews.
And read the articles bashing them that Mont Clemens wrote.
Butchwater is the first one we read, and oh my goodness, it is brutal. Lilian deserves all the praises in the world for being able to write such amazing criticisms and providing a voice to this character that just makes you love to hate him from the very beginning, before we even meet him.
Let's bring this around to Mont Clemens now then, since we're getting onto his beautiful bashing. He's the art critic in this book, and he is one of the most perfect villains.
He's not, that's the amazing thing about him. It's not, when you meet him in person,
He's just kind of an oddball that wants to keep an old house the way that it is, who lives with his cat and owns a lot of expensive art.
and it's just such a weird dichotomy that he's very, so a lot of these characters are one-dimensional. That's one of the things I don't like about Zoe, is I feel like she's very one-dimensional, and she's there to fill a purpose, not to be a person. But Mont Clemens is there to be a person.
Oh, he's a person.
He is villainized everywhere else, and so you expect him to be terrible from the very beginning, but he can actually be very agreeable. He can be very charming.
And he's younger than I always felt that he feels like he is, because it's always, oh yes, he's got this, cluttered, eclectic house, and he wears these robes, and he smells like limes, and I'm like, oh, he's an old man. No, he's actually a younger, middle-aged, starting to bald a little bit on top man. I'm thinking old man with white hair and maybe a nice manicured beard, but that's not Mount Clemens.
Not at all. And that's the amazing is, so you meet this man who is so vilified, so hated, and I can't bring myself around to simply hate him. There are things about him that are charming. There are things about him that are admirable. There are hobbies he has that are so innocent, and you can tell he has so much joy for them. It's just so weird having this antagonist in a 1960s book that is basically a gray character, a gray moral character. That's not something I was expecting from a 1960s book, which not too much earlier, Lord of the Rings was coming out. This is a black and white time. I was not expecting to find this morally gray character, and obviously here turns out to be a horrible villain and very much a puppet master. But at the same time, the entire book, you do sit down and wonder, did he do it? Didn't he do it? Is it possible? Would he have?
Yeah, he's a very lovable villain. He's a great chef. He has this cat that he talks about consistently, like even writes articles about this cat. He adores this cat.
And he adores him with all the love in his heart.
He likes to talk about the old artists and how they're his friends in a way, because he connects really well with the old style art. He's a great conversationalist.
He's very multifaceted.
You don't want to hate him.
You don't want to hate him at all.
He is weird, though. I think the way he talks about his cat is very weird. I actually went back through some of the chapters where Jim first meets him, and the way he talks about Coco, his cat, he talks about it like it's a person.
It absolutely is a person.
It's just ridiculous. And I mean, the cats, the Siamese cats are very intelligent, but I think he does give the cat just a little bit too much credit. And the cat in the book is very intelligent and does help Jim figure out about the whole basement thing with the hidden art, and used his own kitchen knife and the blood at the bottom of the stairs and all of that. But I do think he does give his cat a little bit too much credit. I mean, he goes on, it's like, yes, the cat knew you smoked a pipe before you even walked into the room, and the cat is sensing you to see if he likes you, and all that, which may be valid, but it feels really weird.
It does. As someone who has a cat, and he is basically my first child, it is weird how he talks about his cat. As a declared fur baby lover, I post pictures of my cat, and I hold him, and I call him my teenager, and I speak like him like he's my firstborn child. It is weird how Mont Clemens talks about his cat.
Your cat is an old codger.
He is wonderful, and I love him. Anyhow. Well, one thing I do want to bring up about the cat is one of the things I love about her writing style is Coco never does anything that would be weird for a cat to do. It's Qwill that goes in and adds his intentions afterwards that makes him more than a cat.
Qwill's much more normal about it than Mount Clemens is, though. He doesn't, the cat definitely knew to show me this. It's kind of like, oh, the cat's doing this thing. Look, this thing could potentially be important.
Yeah, and then at the end of the book, he's over there questioning the cat's, I think he's bitten a little bit into the Mont Clemens mindset at the end, where he's like, did you do this on purpose?
Did you know? So the guy that kills Mount Clemens, because Mount Clemens kills Zoe's husband. Spoiler. The guy that kills Mount Clemens, when do we meet him?
So we do not meet him in the book. That is one thing going back, because I've read this, like I said, 4 times.
Because we get to the end, right, where he pops up, and I'm like, who is this? And everybody seems to know who he is. And I'm like, who is this person that we clearly know?
We've never met him. The only thing that gives him away is there is a part in the book where when he goes downstairs, he sees the robot paintings by O. Narks. So there's a signature on the robot paintings. And then when we go down the second time, Coco reads the name backwards, and it is Scrano backwards is very close to O. Narks, and that's when Oscar walks in. And those were the 2 hints we got. And like I said, I've read this book 4 times before this. I've never picked up on it until this last time when I was heat-seeking missile, reading every word, absorbing everything. But I feel like to a casual, this is a terrible ending, because who the heck is this person? How did Qwill suddenly be like, oh, Narks? And I would agree with that. I think this is one of the weaker endings in the series because of that.
I do think that's one of the things I can fault this book on, is I got to the end of this book and I was like, I have no idea who this person is. I would have loved if he was maybe at the beginning, a little character at the beginning. We meet him that one time. He's kind of that a little side character. He's mentioned the one time, we get his name and we don't talk about him for the rest of the book. He's like, oh yeah, it's Mount Clemens' assistant. His name is whatever. And then we don't talk about him again because he works up in New York, right? We wouldn't have a reason to see him again. Be like, oh yeah, that guy that's up in New York. We wouldn't even have to meet him. If he was just mentioned, oh, Mount Clemens' assistant who works up in New York, he's doing blah 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 for Mount Clemens.
Imagine this. Qwill walks into Lamberth Gallery. He almost knocks into O. Narks, who walks out. Qwill asks Lamberth, hey, who is that guy? And he goes, oh, that's Scrano's American agent. He helps us set up the whatever. Perfect.
That would have been perfect. And I wouldn't have thought of him again, like at all, until he popped up later. And I would be like, oh yeah, that guy. Oh my gosh! And it would have been beautiful.
Yeah, I do feel like the signature is not a big enough tip away, because like I said, I read this 4 times. Didn't pick up a single time that it was on the signature.
I like how she did that though, kind of in a way. I wish it had been bigger, but I do kind of like how she did that, because through the latter half of the book, he does start talking about how a lot of the people look like the art that they've made. And when he sees the dude come in through the door, he sees the square-shaped jaw face, and he's like, oh my gosh, it's the guy that's been painting the robots.
Yes, I do like how she plants that seed the entire book. From Cal Jalape to Zoe to Onargs. You can see artists always paint themselves is a trend throughout the entirety of the book.
And that I like a lot. I just wish that Onargs' name had been somewhere in the beginning of the book.
Yeah. Speaking of the Lamberth Gallery, talking about the complete opposite of Mont Clemens.
Oh, the man that you hate?
Earl Lamberth. I don't hate him.
He's kind of skeevy feeling. He's
gross. He's very gross.
I mean, when I first read through this, I didn't get a skeevy feeling. He just felt very uptight. He felt very gray, like the color gray. A statue. There's not much emotion there. He's just very flat-faced. What are you doing here? You're classic. I am an art dealer. I have no emotion. What are you doing in my gallery? Feeling.
Yeah, and I think the major thing with him is the language she uses to write about him, and what Earl does and how he carries himself makes you uncomfortable. And something about it is, I just do not like this guy. From the way he holds his hands behind his back, and he lifts his head all weird and holds himself weird and always has his face on, to mentioning very casually incest.
It doesn't feel... Okay, the incest thing was weird, but the way he holds himself feels very, okay, he's not necessarily proud of the gallery because you find out later that it's actually Mont Clemens' gallery, but he's putting on the facade of being proud of the gallery, which is probably why it comes out weird, because he's not actually, he's just trying to stand up straight, hands behind the back is kind of help with posture. I need something to do with my hands, and he keeps his head up. It's a very posture thing.
And I think the major thing is, and we do find out later that this is all a facade, in a way, you can sense it's a facade. He's not feeling this genuinely. He is not getting enjoyment out of this. He has no love for this. He just has a job to do.
No, you can tell he has no love for it. If he did, he would have put more emphasis on different things about the different pieces of art. For the most part, he's just kind of like, oh, that's painted by this person. It's a piece about this, which in that one case, with the triangles done by Scrano, it's a piece about incest, and then just kind of keeps on going, and there's no emotion there.
Yeah, and there's no look at these brushstrokes, whatever. And maybe he is in the financial district, and so maybe it's better because salesmen are like, I just want to know what this is, I want to know who it's by, and I want to know the price. So maybe that works for him as a sales, but it's just, there is no love for it. It is a business. That's all this is. It's all about sales.
It's all about sales.
And then we have the third murder victim who, what is even his point? Other than to make Butchie look guilty. What is the point of this character?
Nino, well, it's also to make Zoe look guilty in a way, because he's also connected with her. And so there's the potential that Zoe's killing people close to her. I don't know why.
But even when Qwill thinks back on it, he's like, oh, but she murdered the husband under Zoe's want because she didn't love him anymore. Oh, she murdered Mont Clemens because he was trying to force her into an uncomfortable position that she didn't want to be in.
I think the reasoning with Nino is that she killed him because he was starting to outshine her.
I don't know.
Which, he makes sculptures, and that's a different branch of art.
Completely different. And so it makes sense that there's a Nino-Butchie rivalry going on, because she also does sculptures, but I don't know. I never got the vibe that it made sense that Zoe would want to kill Nino.
Yeah, the whole happening was weird. It was very a happening. It made you go, yep, that happened.
As someone who spends a lot of time with creatives and creative people, it felt exactly like I thought a pretentious art event at a fancy art school would be like. Other than that, what is this scene?
Yeah, it's very odd.
Anyway. So, and then on top of that, we have the throwaway characters. Mrs. Duxbury.
Oh, I forgot about her.
Exactly. There is no point to her. You meet her once and it's like, oh, she's an art collector.
She has a point. It's just, they mention her at the beginning. Her whole raison d'etre is to be the competing art journalist at the competitor paper.
No, she's not. That's Mace Sisler.
Oh, see, I have no idea what we're talking about now. I clearly care about these throwaway characters.
See, so Mrs. Duxbury is introduced, and she's an art collector, and then later on you find out that her maiden name has something to do with the art school, and that is it.
What does she collect? I actually remember writing that in my notes. What does she collect?
It just says art.
Okay.
That's how important this character is. She has no point whatsoever. So I feel like the book would have done better to cut her out and give more time to actual characters. May Sisler, I don't understand why she's a named character. She doesn't need to be a named character. She is the rival art newspaper man. She's not a critic.
Well, I think she's a named, see, as I was saying before, when I thought we were talking about this person a minute ago, she's only a named character because she's at the Valentine's Day ball and we actually meet her. It does make sense for her to be at the ball because she is the rival writer for the other paper, and I do believe that is purely the only reason she has a name. Because before we meet her at the ball, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, they have a little old lady that writes, nice little art reviews on their paper.
She has one line of dialogue. The editor at the beginning of the book has way more to do with the story than she does. But she gets named, and that was the thing I was like, that's weird that we're just throwing out a name for her. Because she's literally just there to be like, oh, that Mont Clemens, he's a naughty boy. Cool, everybody else is saying that too. What are you adding here?
there's a rival paper and they have a writer over there. She may have just been trying to show how bland the articles for the art column at the other paper are.
That's true. She talks to you and you get a very immediate sense of what her articles are like. I just think it's weird that she chose to name this character instead of just keeping her the rival. But maybe it's because of, that would have been weird in conversation. I don't know. I just think it's odd that she got named.
I fully believe she only has a name because she was at the ball.
And then we have Mr. Fairhair, who used to be in charge of the museum. And he's literally just there to show Qwill how powerful Mont Clemens reviews are, and that is it.
Yep, he's had to resign. The museum is making him resign because of these bashing reviews that Mont Clemens has been writing about the museum. Bashing the management, bashing the art in the museum, bashing the color of the uniforms, probably bashing the front door, bashing the lighting.
And a little bit of poetic justice that I kind of liked that she gave him is Mont Clemens cost him his job, so later in the book, he gets Mont Clemens' job. Because Qwill's like, you should pick this guy as your art critic. But other than that, I think he's supposed to be suspicious in the dagger plotline, because when we first meet him, Fairhair jumps back and is doing something suspicious. But Qwill doesn't ask any questions about it. There's no follow-up.
Qwill must just be like, yeah, I'm quiet when I enter rooms.
It was a weird throwaway thing that I think was supposed to do with the dagger, like, oh no, Fairhair stole the dagger. I think that's exactly what it is. Fairhair stole the dagger and stabbed Mont Clemens because he cost him his job.
He's just adding another little suspect. And I mean, if he had been the murderer at the end, I probably would have had that, oh, okay, that makes sense.
It still comes back to Occam's razor. Why go out of your way to steal a knife from the museum when you could just go to your kitchen? That's the thing. The dagger subplot I never liked, because it seems way too convoluted to actually be relevant. And then you find out it's just, it was literally misplaced, exactly like John Smith said it was.
Is his name really John Smith?
Yeah, John Smith is the other guy who's probably taking Fairhair's job. His name's John Smith. The only purpose of him is to antagonize Qwill and get him to write that article about the dagger. And then his second job is to be Sandy Jalape's plaything, so it shows that, Sandy stopped paying attention to Qwill because now she has John.
Okay, so you can tell he's a throwaway character because his name is very close to John Doe, which is the name that they give to bodies that they can't identify, and his last name is Smith, which is the most common last name imaginable. She was just like, yeah, John Smith.
And he's handsome, and that's the one thing, and so I was like, yep, Sandy's going to go in for that. And then we never see him again, except for he goes on 2 dates with Sandy, and that's it.
They'll have beautiful, illegitimate children together.
Oh my word. Which begs the question now. I wonder if both kids are actually Cal's. Because they looked so much like her.
You wouldn't be able to tell, yeah.
You wouldn't be able to tell. They look nothing like their father.
Oh, that's a weird thought.
Now that's an interesting train we could go on.
Let's not go down there.
Well, it's more interesting than going to a junkyard, meeting a weird sculpturer.
Nino is so weird.
Who dies a chapter later. Okay, you introduced him to be dead. Cool.
You introduced this poor man to then kill him later. He has no meaning.
We needed fodder. Fill the pages.
That's all he is. He really is just fodder.
He's a red herring, and Qwill's trying to sit back and be like, yes, I can solve all 3 murders. But then he thinks of a theory, and is like, nope, that's too clean. Then why were you sitting there trying to connect all 3 murders if you're immediately gonna turn around like, nope, that works too well?
I mean, if you actually list out all the potential suspects and all of the reasons they potentially could have killed these 3 different people, you really do have one of those classic pin boards that you see on TV for old detective shows with the pictures and the red wire connecting the different people together, and it's a mess.
It's a hot mess.
Which makes it harder to figure out who done it, which is nice. That's always good with murder mysteries. It's like, I don't know who done it. Who did it?
And the nice thing, for the most part, all of the characters are different. Even the throwaway characters are one-dimensional in different ways, which is nice.
Yes, they're different colored pieces of paper.
Through and through, the main characters are very interesting, and while I don't think you could have made a series out of it, one book about about squabbling artists fighting with critics, fighting with galleries, fighting with each other is very interesting. It becomes this, it starts out, it's supposed to be, oh, this clean-cut, pretty artist supporting artist thing, and then you find out, no, it's very cutthroat, and people are very egotistical, and their pride gets hurt very easily.
Yeah, criticism can be very hard to take.
Especially for something this personal, and as we pointed out, the whole point of the book is artists paint themselves, and so they put a lot of themselves into these paintings, and so it's like you're rejecting the artist and not just the work. It's very interesting. Oh, speaking of throwaway characters, Mr. and Mrs. Riggs.
Oh, I forgot about them. The ones that dress like peasants.
Literally just to be like, hey, there's another sculptor guy that's actually at Lamberth Gallery. We will never see and talk to you ever again.
Their reason is probably the same as all the rest of the throwaway characters at the ball. It's really just to add that artist ambiance. You know, there are other random names that we can throw out there periodically for Sandy to bash.
He makes grasshoppers. That's we see more of his artwork than we see of him, and I feel like that's the actual point of his character, is just so we can recognize the name on these random sculptures.
Grasshoppers aren't bad. Grasshoppers are nice. I like grasshopper sculptures.
And Qwill likes sailboats.
Miss Qwill likes sailboats.
It is a really nice perspective having somebody that doesn't understand art being thrown into this art world. And you can really feel, because most of us are not in the art world or in the high art world of this. So it's really nice to have a character that you can really sympathize with and you can put yourself in their shoes. So I think she does an excellent job of not only building Qwill up to be a likable character and a good protagonist, and actually a pretty decent detective, all things considered, even though he was wrong on every single charge, and I'm still mad at him for going downstairs in the back apartment and being like, hey, there's a painting that's in progress right there. Well, there's nothing downstairs, going back up.
Yeah, he went down there and I was like, this is suspicious. This is suspicious on a number of levels. And then he was like, nah, this is just a downstairs basement room. And I was like, no, this is suspicious. Get back down there.
And the entire time, he's overanalyzing all of these super little things, but he gets thrown in his face a huge clue. And he's just like, nope, Coco, you were wrong. Gonna go back upstairs now.
Silly cat. Tricks are for kids.
I'm so mad about that. But other than that, he's a very enjoyable character. It does feel like he's doing a lot of the detective work with the help of the cat. He does have very good themes throughout. I think Qwill has a very interesting voice, and it's consistent throughout, which is very impressive for a female writer to be writing a male character who actually feels like a male character and not a male character through the lens of a female writer.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with that. She does write a very good male character.
She makes it a pleasure to read by making it suspenseful but humorous. There are parts that will actually make people laugh out loud when they read it. And not in your face, but when Qwill goes out and gets all of these things for Zoe just to come back, and Zoe will be like, no, I don't want any of them. A little dark chuckle inside of you flares up. And then it happens throughout the entire thing, is there's just little moments that are humorous that make all of this much more enjoyable.
Yeah, it's a really good read. It's nice and suspenseful. You don't expect the ending at all, really.
Which may be a point against the book.
Mont Clemens' death aside, the fact that Mont Clemens killed what's-his-face Lamberth is actually nicely thought out and executed.
And it's very interesting to learn about. That's something that I feel like happens in mystery books sometimes, is they'll write this plot out and be like, oh, the villain did this, but it's not a very interesting plot. But this is very interesting. It is very convoluted in the right ways.
It's well thought out. It's a really nice little puzzle.
And it fits together at the end, and it all makes sense, and it feels doable. Obviously by a man who is very intelligent to come up with this and execute it properly, but it still feels within the realm of possibility that this would happen.
Definitely, yeah. She definitely wrote a really nice mystery here.
If you could ask one question to the author, what would it be?
Why didn't you add the guy that killed... No, I'm just kidding. I'd probably want to talk to her what her experience with cats is, just because I'm a cat person and that would be an interesting chat. That, or why olive green for the desks slash telephones slash typewriters in the office? Why olive green? What drove you towards olive green?
Probably to make the experience just as unpleasant for the readers to think about as it was for Qwill. Because we can all agree, olive green suffocating a room is not pleasant.
Olive green is a beautiful accent color. Olive green is not great as a solid wall color in a room or a color for every piece of furniture. Unless olive green is your favorite color, and then man, you do you. It's your house and your furniture. You do what you see fit.
What brings you joy? What brings you pleasure?
What brings you joy? I personally don't like olive green that much, though.
Just the idea of an olive green typewriter gives me hives. I don't like the idea that someone has taken a typewriter and has just been like olive green out of all of the colors.
Okay, an olive green typewriter would look good if you painted yellow roses over top.
Yeah, but that just puts it back to being an accent color.
It's a backdrop color.
Anyway, so my question would be, I would be curious how she came up with the idea for this book. This is the first book in the series, so she had to come up with everything from scratch, from the main character to the premise to the city to everything. So I'd be really curious how she came up with the idea to have a down on his luck reporter suddenly get thrown into the art column and then thrown into murders in the art world. It's just, I think that would be you would have to have a very interesting train of thought to get there.
Another question, bouncing off of yours, would be wondering who she based Mont Clemens off of. Well-written characters are sometimes based off of people that you know in real life, and it'd be interesting to find out if it's a mixture of people that she knows or if it's someone that acts like that in real life that she knew, or if it's an actor that she read about. It'd be really interesting to find that out.
Or if it's a part of herself. I'd also want to know who she based Qwill off of.
Yes, that too.
He feels like a cool uncle. The entire book. That's just the best way I can put it. He reminds me of my uncle. I think my uncle's really cool.
Your uncle is really cool.
Yes, thank you. He just has these really interesting mannerisms that just make him feel homey in a way. Like a member of the family. He could come to family dinners. And I feel like that would have to be based off some man in her life. Either she had an uncle or her dad or her husband, if she was married.
Or a family friend.
Just somebody. Overall, I think it's a very funny book. I think it's very suspenseful and I think it's very entertaining, all in the right parts and in the right proportions. I recommend this to everyone. I have forced so many people to read this book. I forced my husband to read this book, who doesn't even like mysteries, and even he was like, yeah, it's good, which is great praise from him. Would you read this book again?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to need to sit on my shelf for probably about a year or so, and just for me to forget the plot just a little bit. But I can definitely see being like, oh, what was that book that oh yeah, the cat that could read. Yeah, I want to read that one again. Let's go back through that. It's a fun read. I like reading about Jim and going through this mystery with him because he's a fun character to follow around.
Yeah, I think she accomplishes something very great here. Like I said, I've read this book 4 times before. This is my 5th time. I will definitely be reading it again at some point. But the reason I feel like it's so rereadable is because having the mystery solution does not ruin the mystery. And that is one nice thing about not having it be Butchie Bolton, having it be a much smaller character, is you can enjoy all of the other characters completely, all of the other storylines, even if you know how they're going to turn out. They're humorous, they're fun, they're enjoyable characters, even when they're super one-dimensional, or they're seen in one scene and that's it. They're still fun to be around. I would go hang out, not for very long, and not for a continuous amount of times, but I would be okay with meeting most of these people in real life.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I probably don't ever want to actually meet Sandy ever. But everybody else, yeah. Sandy just seems really, she's just kind of skeevy.
You can have Zoe, I'll take Sandy. I don't know, there's something about Sandy that amuses me more than it annoys me, and maybe it's just because it's so obvious how she's a horrible person, but she does it in like a cheerful way, so I'm okay. I can't explain it. I don't know. There's a personality match where I'm like, okay, you do you so stupid, but it's okay, you're entertaining.
Yeah, I think Zoe doesn't bother me because she's not inherently a bad person. She just kind of is offhandedly bad. And to some extent, I mean, it shouldn't be ignored, but I can kind of look past it or look around it to be able to stand that person for as long as I need to.
Yeah. I think that's just what it comes down to is personal tolerance for drama. And Sandy is straight up drama, which I'm okay with. Like I said, I would not want to be best friends with her. I would not want to come over to family dinners, but if she was if she was in the office that I worked at, I would be fine with Sandy because you would get to hear some crazy stories about her. She would complain about this random person when you know it's actually her fault. But it would be fine. It would at least be amusing. If it was Zoe, she does not have the same entertainment value, and I would always feel like she's over there being like, I am better than you. And I'm like, ugh, I'd rather someone be outright and be like, I am better than you and be wrong and dumb than someone who just thinks that in their brain.
See, if they think that in their brain, I can just ignore that.
I don't know. I like people just being outright, and like I said, I don't like Zoe's flaky. That's another thing. I don't like how flaky Zoe is.
Well, I'm not saying you need to be her friend. She probably would actually bail on anything you ever invited her to.
Oh, heck yeah! Or be in charge of something super important and then flake out on it like, oh, sorry, I was busy. Thanks, Zoe.
Yeah. She'd make a horrible friend.
She'd make a horrible employee in general. Good thing she works for herself. But if I were rating this book, I would definitely give it a cat fighting to save your life out of 10. I just think it's a good book. It is entertaining, it's fun, and you feel good at the end of it.
I think it's definitely 10 shiny doorknobs out of 5 stars. It's a good book. It's a really good read. It's nice and quirky, especially with the different artists in it and their weird little quirks and the look into that world, and the critic reviews or the insults in those are just they're beautiful.
If half of the book was just Mont Clemens reviews, I would still love it. It would probably be amazing.
It'd be so good. I'd still read that. Oh my goodness.
There is a reason the art page is so popular, and there's nothing about Mont Clemens that lets you down. So there's a lot of hype building to him each time, to his reviews, and then meeting him in person. And it is worth it.
If you're looking for a reason to read this book, read it just so that you can read through Mont Clemens' reviews. They are so good.
So thank you so much for joining us today. You can keep up to date with us by checking us out on Twitter or Instagram. And you can help support our podcast by checking out our Patreon, where for just $1 a month, you'll get access to our bonus episodes, where we look at the movie adaptations for some of our favorite books. This month we start the Harry Potter series and look at Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone if you're literally anywhere else that isn't the US.
Actually, it's not just the US. There are a couple other countries that have it as the Sorcerer's Stone.
Well, for everywhere that's Philosopher's Stone, I'm sorry you're going to be listening to an hour of us calling it the Sorcerer's Stone and cringing, and I apologize. In addition, you can join our Discord server where we talk all kinds of books from different genres, or you can even take part in deciding what book we cover next.
Join us next time when we swim through a romance, Big Sky Secrets, by Linda Lale Miller.
For this book, we highly recommend you getting a used copy or simply listening to the podcast. It really isn't worth full price. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I'm Sam Reiner.
And I'm Lizzie Sawyer.
And we hope to see you and a friend here next time.